Welcome to the Deconstructing Data live stream and podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, BDEX's founder and CEO. What's new, David?
Hey, Jessie. Well, we were just talking about this off air, so I'll talk about it on air now. So I got creative with Claude today, and I asked it to give me an idea for a video to post, and that was relevant in the ad tech space. And it came up with this crazy idea of this horror trailer with somebody walking through a graveyard, and the tombstones read I'm not going to read it. So it says, the first tombstone says, "Here lies a third-party cookie, gone but not forgotten." The next gravestone says, "Deprecated made, cause of death, Apple ATT." And then the third one says, "Anonymous email hash, never matched to a real human." And then it goes back and I guess a dramatic voice says, "Every campaign deserves better than this." It was a pretty funny video, so I posted it. Actually what I did is I had Claude created the video idea, and then I put it all into Grok and Grok Imagine or whatever they call it, and it made a video. So it's pretty funny. So
Claude is the latest magician. I love it, and it's a little bit creepy. So everyone should go check it out on David's page.
Yeah.
Unlike the normal stuff video that comes out on David's page. Yeah. But today we get to have another great episode of Deconstructing Data. I can't believe we're on 194 episodes. It's crazy to see. Right. We're almost 6 weeks, so we get 200 episodes. So we are excited to welcome on Dominic Bonaker, founder and CEO of Lunar. Welcome to the show, Dominic.
Hey, thank you for having me, guys.
Hey, Dominic. Welcome to our crazy episode here of the podcast, the Deconstructing podcast. It's going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you, but I'm going to let you sort of kick it off and give our viewers and listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to build Lunar, and what exactly is Lunar doing for its clients?
Yeah, sure. So I go back, I take the story back about 8 years ago. So I was just finishing university, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I decided that I didn't really want to get a job, so I needed to make money for myself. And I kind of fell into running a business, and that kind of was the start, really. So I started off, so my background's in software engineering, and I started off by building websites and running marketing campaigns for small businesses across the UK. And that was going fine. That was going really well. And I ran that successfully for 5 years. And then the pandemic came around, and coming out of that, we knew that we needed to diversify the business. We needed to make us stand out a little bit more. We needed to differentiate ourselves from the competitors. So we decided to kind of double down on what we were actually good at the time, which was helping businesses with their marketing, helping them with data behind the marketing, most importantly. So we were looking at their website for things like Google Analytics. We were looking at their marketing campaign results, and essentially we became a bit of a data go-to for a lot of these businesses. And that kind of then turned into what we do now, which is Lunar is essentially a data partner for marketing agencies. So we work alongside marketing agencies, running marketing campaigns, looking after ad spend for other businesses. And we work alongside them to help them, firstly, with attribution. So we make sure that the data coming in is useful and that it's clean. We then help them with their reporting, their dashboards, and then finally, business intelligence, AI-powered insights, all kind of bundled up, packaged up, and they then put their logo on it, and it goes out the door. So, yeah, that's kind of the short story, so to speak.
That's great. I love how you opened that up. I didn't want to get a job, so I thought I'd start my own business. No, it's great. No, it's a great journey, and it's great to see your success for sure. And So let's jump into the first topic and dig a little deeper into what we have upcoming here. So the first topic, we have data attribution and understanding what drives results. We talk a lot about attribution on the show, and its challenges. There's a lot of challenges because everybody wants to report that they were that the conversion was as a result of their campaign, whether it's Meta or Google Ads or whatever it is. So attribution is always a challenge, and trying to figure out exactly where the conversion came from. So talk to us about that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think for me, the way in which attribution is done these days is massively outdated. And I think the problem with attribution right now is everyone is looking at last click attribution. If you go to Google, you're running Google ads, the last click is the one that gets the credit. If you go to Meta ads, last click is the one that gets the credit. And it's the reason that they do that is because it incentivizes you to spend more money on the platform, because it looks like those are the ones that are driving results. And whilst there is a conversation for last touch, there's so many other attribution models that just aren't spoken about. So you've got first touch. Again, I'm not a massive fan of that, but at least you can start to then track with things that are a little bit earlier on in the funnel, more kind of brand activation, more brand awareness campaigns, which, still makes up a huge percentage of marketing spend for a lot of businesses, and also makes up a big portion of a lot of people's kind of marketing funnel. That different businesses do differently. One of the most common case studies that I always draw on is New Balance, the clothing sports brand. Previous CEO was doing 70% direct response performance marketing, 30% brand, and their numbers just continued to kind of drop down further and further. New CEO came in, flipped it, and in kind of period, he went from 30% brand activation. He went from 30% brand to 70% brand, and then 30% kind of direct response. We basically flipped the model completely 180. And now New Balance is basically everywhere. It's a really, really popular brand, and more people are kind of wearing it. So there's more attribution models that need to be spoken about. One that I particularly like, and one that we're doing a lot with a minute, with a platform that we've built in-house, which maybe I'll have some time to talk about later on. But we're doing a lot around what's called scientific attribution. So we're looking across the entire conversions journey that a customer goes through, and then we're ranking those individual touch points based on the importance that we deem those touch points. And we have access to data, we have access to user behavior, we have access to user journeys. So why are we not using this to better score how people are actually buying product and converting online?
Yeah, I love that.
I totally hear that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yep, go ahead, Jessica.
Totally, thank you. Sorry, and I think we have a little bit of a delay, and it's my fault because I'm not in my original setting. But you said scientific attribution, and it's just one of those things that I think people underestimate until credibility is really on the line. I'm surprised by it. I feel like it is, I don't know, obviously it says the word scientific and it's just a little more academic, but really it's just because it's trusted, it's tested, and it's built on. So I don't know. I don't think we've ever really talked about scientific attribution on this show before, but I don't know. What else would you say about it to anyone who may be new to it, Dominic?
I think scientific attribution is important, but it only benefits really when you've got data available. And as I said, there is data everywhere, so you can get it. The problem is a lot of businesses don't actually build data as part of their foundational part of business. Essentially, they just rely on the platforms that already exist, and rightfully so. They're businesses, they've got other priorities, they've got bills to pay, and they've got employees, and and all of these things. But if you are making important decisions, data should fundamentally be a part of those decisions. Otherwise, you're just doing it on gut feel. I put a poll out on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and it was, if you had to cut your marketing budget by 50%, how would you decide on what to cut? I'm paraphrasing. And a large proportion of that said previous experience or gut feeling. And my issue with that, it just kind of really demonstrates kind of what's going on, especially in kind of the marketing world where we do a lot of, obviously we work in that marketing data space, but people are more likely just to result in the habits that they've already gone through and the experience that they have, instead of taking some time to build a form of data room or a data suite, or even the equivalent of a studio dashboard or something, and actually look at the data for what it is. But I think that a lot of businesses don't want to do that, A, because they think it's complicated, but we can talk about why it's easier now than ever because there's AI tools and all of these things. But I think they're also scared of the results, because it's easier just to kind of hide away from the actual results of how business is performing. And if the data is complicated, you can step away from it. You can create a bit of separation between yourself and the data. But this is where we're the opposite, and we're really trying to force this into the ecosystem, into businesses, and say, well, don't hide behind data. Use that to inform your decisions. Stop making decisions on gut feel. And once you have that data, going back to your question around scientific, which is the more data you have, the more accurate that can get. But essentially, if in a really simple term, scientific attribution is just the method of looking across the entire, let's say it's a bot. So someone sees an ad online, they click a different couple of buttons, and then they actually convert online. Well, what we're actually is the pages that they spend the most time on, well, there's probably more important on that. Or if there's an interaction that they had to do, so they had to put their email address in, or they watched a video sales letter, or just a video online, there's more importance to those kind of touch points. And this is where scientific attribution comes in. And that's what you can start to optimize for as well. You could say, well, if I'm a business and I do a lot of online sales, and my highest average order value is on, I don't know, someone that clicks on an ad and then watches a video, which is pretty common, to be honest. Well, you can build a scientific attribution model that kind of shows that and demonstrates that. But then also you can replicate and force as many of your customers through that same kind of funnel, because you're going to get the highest average order value off them. It could just be a simple thing of just adding a 2-minute video in the middle, but because the importance of it, and that's where obviously scientific comes in, that's what makes building out kind of sales funnels, sales motions, and things like that super, super powerful when you then combine it with something like scientific attribution.
That's a great point. I mean, understanding the funnel that a customer came through is so important. It's at such a differentiator, what you just described there, because understanding that funnel enables you to your point, spend more, on the media that was driving that funnel versus any other touch points that you may have had. And understanding which of those funnels are driving the best customers, or the customer the highest LTV, whatever it is. Great point for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great topic. Marketers love talking about attribution. I know I love talking about attribution. But yeah, I think, specifically most marketers think of like HubSpot, Google Analytics, type of touch point, and who got the credit, like first touch, last touch, maybe multi-touch if you're being really fancy, but it's still directional. So I don't know, the scientific attribution is different in that I feel like it's asking what happened before the conversion to some extent, and it's asking what actually caused the conversion a little bit more than what just like typically got the credit. But I don't know, I could talk attribution all day, and I have different takes on it, but what's your take on that, Dominic?
Yeah, no, I think you're so right. I think if you're just starting out trying to build some form of data in a small kind of, whether you're a startup, you've got a couple employees, or, data fundamentally will come at some point, and you rely on the tools that are available to you. So, if you're running Facebook ads, you're going to see Meta Business Suite, and you're going to see all your analytics in there. That's fine, okay, and that's but just know that they are incentivized to make their numbers look higher than, you know, all the other platforms, as all the other platforms are. So if you're running ads on Google, and this is why you'll typically see you're reporting in Google Analytics and you're reporting in Google Ads will give you different numbers. They'll give you LTVs, they'll give you different click-through rates, customer acquisition costs. All of these numbers will be slightly different. Because tracking isn't 100%. So this is where the kind of attribution thing, you know, starts to fall down, because if you're not attributing for, you know, the majority of your audience, then you're going to start to kind of, those numbers are going to start to dwindle. But also then it comes around, you know, if you're trying to use the audience that you're targeting for maybe retargeting purposes, or trying to better understand your audience through things like data enrichment, through identity resolution, things like that, the quality of the data is where that really kind of stands out. You know, if you don't have the quality data, because you're relying on these third-party tools like the HubSpot, like the Google Ads, like the, you know, Facebook, Instagram ads, you know, those kind of tools, you're always going to come undone compared to the other tools that exist, like the ones that I know that you guys offer, you know, the other tools out there that help find those people online and then kind of combine that in there as well.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for that. Attribution is always interesting. But let's turn into now data reporting. So turning the data into clear insights. Can you tell us your thoughts on this, Dominic?
Sure. So so I'll speak about our clients, because this is essentially what we do. What I always kind of start to say, and a framework and an exercise that I go with them, is a lot of businesses will come and say, okay, well, we report on this and this and this, and it's pages and pages and pages of different metrics. You know, it's a Looker Studio that's pages long. It's, you know, Google Analytics custom reports that are just crazy complicated. And what I get them to do is I look at the metric and I say, if that was to change tomorrow, what action would you take? And most of the time people go, well, I wouldn't do anything. Well, then why is it in the kind of the weekly reporting? Mm-hmm. Like if your CAC decided to go, your customer acquisition cost decided to double overnight, well, you best believe that you're going to do everything in your power to understand why, because that is fundamental to the business. That should be in reporting. Your likes on a social media post that one of your team members kind of did, does that matter if that 100 or 10 or 50? You know, the numbers don't really matter there. There's a different conversation when it comes to brand building and things, but I'm not going to kind of go into that too much. But fundamentally, like when you're building reports, and this kind of comes onto the insight thing, which is good quality data in means good insight. If you're muddling that data with vanity metrics, as they're pretty commonly called, but things like likes and impressions on things, like those numbers are really hard to then stack up against acquisition cost, LTV, churn rates, like these harder numbers that are kind of baked into what I think a successful business should be monitoring. So when it comes to actually building those reports, focus on those metrics that are actually going to change the business in some way. So that could be LTV, lifetime value, that could be customer acquisition cost, that could be LTV to CAC, so the ratio between those two numbers. You know, these more, when working with clients or clients of clients, it's quite easy. People like to see the numbers, and people like to see the kind of the financial figures behind a lot of stuff, which means that if we can show, if we can show ROAS at, return on ad spend at 4x, for example, well, it's a lot better if we show them the amount of money that we were actually to generate for them, instead of, because a number with a dollar sign in front of it is always going to be more impactful than a 4x kind of number, because there's more context to it. So when actually creating those reports, it's really important to know who you're preparing them for. So if you're preparing them for, CEO kind of level people, or they might like a report in a particular way, which is more explanatory, a bit more understanding of why things happened, versus a CFO who is more interested in how much money did we give you at the start of the year and how much money have you made us as a result of that money. And that's where the conversation of putting that dollar sign in front of everything is super important.
100%. It's funny you brought up CFO. You brought up two things I thought were really important: CAC to LTV ratio, not just looking at them independently, and then CFOs. They're always the best, but always so challenging for marketers to help them see the numbers like really as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in between marketing and finance, is being able to justify the numbers and present them in a way that you're talking about two different types of minds, marketers and financial people, and so it's important to sort of bridge the gap between the two in your reporting.
Sure. And I think that, there's a conversation to personalize these reports, because, you're preparing these reports for a reason. That could be a report that is for, next year's budget sign off. Well, you want to make sure that that is going in front of the CFO, that is super, just give them, if they only had, 3 minutes to look at this thing, well, start with those most important metrics, the ones that are going to get them excited and go, well, actually, we gave you $100,000 last year, and you turned that into $500,000. Okay, great. There's real numbers behind that. There's real tangible things. Or I could phrase it as, we did a 5x return on ad spend. Like, what's more impactful to a CFO when they're talking about numbers day in and day out? What's more impactful to a CEO when you're talking real numbers? The ROAS and the things like that, they're great, but this is where tailoring reporting really works. Is, if you're doing reporting which is a bit more public, well, then you might want to use numbers that are percentages and 5x's, because you don't want to give certain information away, which I understand. If it's internal documents, that information should be available anyway. Best case scenario, it's in a data center that is accessible for different level of people, or a data room, or whatever you kind of call it. That data is kind of live, and there's dashboards kind of going on time. The one step under that is on-demand reporting. So using things like Looker Studio to be able to pull reports, using things like HubSpot, those kind of tools that we've already mentioned. The lowest kind of list of things is kind of reporting when it is asked of you, kind of thing, because then you're just constantly scrambling for reporting, essentially.
Yeah, we have this question here. Oops,
let's pull it up. Have you seen reporting change decisions more when it's framed around revenue instead of performance metrics? Question from the audience.
100%. I think if you can frame it in a way that is, so, I take it from real world example. For we're working with a client. So for us, a client is a marketing agency, and we work for their clients. So if we're preparing reports for the agency, which talks about, the agency did the work that got them more impressions on a post, it got them more likes on a post, and it got them more video watches. Okay, decent metrics, and they could be really, really good metrics. But if we instead said, well, the metrics that we're going to report on is, this is how much they gave you as an ad budget at the start of the year. And as a result, because we've attributed that data correctly, because we've set up a UTM link, or, a UTM tracking, or whatever we decided to use there, we know that that is directly driven revenue to the business of X amount of money, put whatever number in there that you want. That is a lot more of an easier conversation when it comes to renewing budget for that agency than, oh, okay, well, we do, your video got 100,000, impressions or whatever. It's really, make your life easier by talking about the kind of the hard facts, the real numbers, I given you X, what do I get back in Y? I think this has kind of been forced into me as as from an agency perspective, but agencies are getting really, really hit right now. I think ad budgets are being cut, they're being reduced. I think people are trying to leverage AI more, and rightfully so, they should be. So you've really got to fight for those ad budgets. You've got to fight for that marketing spend, and whether you're in-house, so whether you're an agency, like I've just given you the example, or if you're in-house and you're trying to justify your next year budget, you've got to show these kind of real numbers, because otherwise that budget's going to be taken off you and it's going to be reallocated into something else. And you're going to, again, have to do more with less.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So here's the challenge. You're CMO, you're whatever, you're head of marketing, you're out there, you're following your instructions. The reports come out, you're building the reports, and the numbers don't look as good as you want them to look. Like, what, help, because not everybody that's listening is in, has a hockey stick, growth. And so let's talk about like what people should be looking at a lot closer when they're reporting, if they're not achieving the growth that they're trying to achieve.
I think the sooner you can start reporting, the better. So, and the reason I say that is that it gives you run rate. So if you're not seeing change, what I would say is don't wait until month 11, then start pulling reports together, because at that point, regardless of what results that you've made, they could be good or they could be bad, but you're really leaving that up to fate. So, as soon as you can, start reporting on this stuff. But if the results aren't going your way, the benefit of having these reports is that you can start to experiment with different things. And I think experimentation in marketing is massively, massively under implemented. I don't think there's enough experimentation going on in marketing, full stop. I think we need to see more of it. I think everyone's playing it very, very safe, and there's less chance of kind of swinging for the fences, kind of to give an analogy. But what I do think is if you're measuring these things, what you can do is you can look at previous years, you can look at previous campaigns, you can use that data. And this is where the reporting really comes in, is you can see previous data. And an exercise, again, that we'll get to do with, so I do a bit of marketing consultancy on the side. One of the things that we'll get the clients to do, or the people I work with, is what's called like a common factor analysis. So out of your 100 campaigns that you ran, which one were the top 20%? Okay, and those top 20%, what did they have in common? What are the common factors between them? That's where you can start to pull out some of these really key things and make sure that that is part of your new campaigns, your new messaging, your new marketing, before it gets to that point of, okay, the results aren't looking as good. What I will say is if it does get to that point, well, then you need to be more creative with how you are reporting on these things. And by no means am I saying that you need to kind of hide results, because I think that's only going to make things worse. But what you want to do is you want to have the metrics that, as I said, that are closest to that kind of that align the most with the goals and the objectives of the business. And even if they are worse, I would prefer those numbers to go in than vanity metrics to kind of bolster up these reporting, because fundamentally, even if those numbers are down from last year, it still gives you a bit of a line in the sand to say, okay, well, this is where we know that we're at, versus, okay, we're just reporting on vanity, which that can go up and down in a 24-hour period. It doesn't really do anything for your business. Even if numbers are down, well, okay, well, next year we still need to go above that line, because you wouldn't know what direction to kind of move into.
Yeah, it's good. It's good insight. And I think that now more than ever, like, it's easier to analyze data than it ever has been because of AI, which I think brings us into our next topic, AI powered insights. I think that's something that that is definitely making everybody's lives a little easier when it comes to data analysis. It kind of makes it so that anybody can analyze data now, which is crazy. But love to get your insight on this.
Sure. So we heavily use AI throughout the business, not just in the insights, but kind of across the entire thing. And my personal feel is that more businesses need to be adopting AI and using it as part of their business. But now that we've kind of assumed that more people are using it, what you want to do is still keep what's called human in the loop. Still human to kind of check these things. So what we do as part of our reporting, we're open about this, is it says prepared by AI, reviewed by a real human. And our clients really like that, is because we're being honest the fact that we've run these reports through AI. It would have spotted things that, you know, a data scientist may not have potentially, especially if they're working on multiple campaigns. But it also shows that we're doing the due diligence and we are checking these things over. And we do check these things. You know, we're not writing these things because that would have taken us hours and hours, whereas a report before would have taken us 2 hours. It can now take us 20 minutes because it's proofreading instead of actually writing the content. So I think there's definitely a conversation to be had around kind of implementing more AI into reporting. But there's still got to be, for right now, AI is getting better every day. So who knows if I'll still be right on, you know, on this topic in, you know, 6 months' time, who knows? But I still think having someone in the business that understands this data to a degree that the AI becomes a tool that they can then lean on, it doesn't become a crutch that they are forced to use. Because otherwise, what you'll find is that as soon as a number dips, right? So as we said, you know, customer acquisition cost doubles overnight. Well, you can chuck that into, you know, any LLM kind of model that you decide to use, but it's going to give you 10, 15 different reasons. The benefit of having someone that's in the business and that understands it, or even if that's kind of outsourcing to a company or an agency, is they've got the experience of how these things actually go down. They understand what changes in that space, in the market, in the industry, in that particular business, so that they know that, okay, this number has changed, and it's more likely because we changed the offer on the front end of this website, and that's the reason that customer acquisition cost. Okay, cool. Let's run again, talking about experimentation. Let's A/B test this, and let's make sure that this campaign is firing the right way. And, you know, let's change one of the offers back and leave one as the same. Okay, cool. And then we can kind of track customer acquisition cost. You know, an AI model is going to find it really hard to, you know, reverse engineer what has happened, unless it is, you know, plugged into the business 24/7, which some of these models can do and some of these businesses can do. But it's going to be, you know, you start talking about having employees as well, kind of working for the business. Well, not all of their thinking, not all of their decisions are going to go through these kind of LLMs. So one of their decisions that they make could be missed by these kind of AI tools, which then means that you're making decisions on incomplete data. This kind of goes right back to kind of what we were saying very early on, which is, you know, incomplete data, using incomplete data is just, it's better than nothing, but it's kind of next to pointless, because what you're saying is that your decision on 50% kind of brain power, 50% knowledge, like at that point, again, it's just you making up the other 50% with gut feel, and, you know, it doesn't really, it's not going to inform that decision. And we're in an age now where data is so accessible, attribution and tracking is so it's there. You know, we can get our hands on it. There's tools that exist, so use those to help with what we're doing. Then we can kind of take all of that more complete data set, pass that into the AI models, and then use that to actually inform the decisions kind of moving forward.
Yeah, there's something you said that totally resonated with me, was that it's so important. Like, you're doing all of this, you know, analysis, and you're analyzing your whatever it is, your conversions, your sales, your campaigns. But it's so important to understand that at the same time, you need to include in that analysis anything that changes, right? You made a change to a campaign, you moved something or changed something on your website, on our landing page, or whatever it is, because those changes that somebody on your team is making could very well be affecting, right, the you know, the outcome. Like, all of a sudden, one of those changes could make things better, right? It could improve performance, it could improve conversion, or it might do the reverse. And if you're not tracking those changes that were made at the same time as all of the sort of everything else that you're tracking, then you won't necessarily know that change is something that affected the outcome. And so you're analyzing all this data about the conversions and the tracking and the traffic and clicks and impressions and all this other stuff. But if you're not including in that the data set that says, okay, this was changed on our website, you know, you having sort of a log, we changed this campaign, we changed this creative, we, you know, made a change to the website, then you're going to really lose track of what is affecting the outcomes.
Absolutely. I think kind of going back to what I was saying around the experimentation, you should only really be testing one thing at one time, because the problem is if you test multiple things, you don't know what is actually the contributing factor to whether a number changed. So, and I when I say kind of experimentation, I don't mean changing the word "the" to an A or something, like small copy changes like that. Experiment with them and that's fine. But when you're, especially in kind of, again, going back to this kind of marketing world, like an A/B test could be like a whole other kind of hook on an ad, right? Let's use a completely different opener to this video and let's see and that's an experiment. And they're kind of the ratio that I look at when, again, advising on businesses, which is 70% of the same. So do 70% of your stuff that to be working, do that over it. 70% of your budget goes on the same stuff. Take 20% and then do it adjacent to that stuff. So that could be slightly different creative, but it's still the same fundamental message. It's a different hook, but fundamentally it's the same body copy. Change a button on a landing page to say a different word. It's still similar, but it's adjacent. So take 20% of the budget, put it on that. 10%, that is completely crazy, wild ideas that you hope that they fail because you can kind of get it out of your brain and you don't have to worry about it ever again. But having almost like an experimentation budget, a trying budget, just allows you to kind of try these things, and you never know, that 10% might actually give you the entire budget back because you just found something that really, really resonated with the audience. And then that's where you can look at that, do the common factor analysis that we mentioned earlier, look at why that ad or creative or data set worked really well, and then roll that out across your other campaigns that you're also doing.
Yeah, excellent point.
Definitely, really is. I think we've pretty much made it through all three topics, except tech stack, our fourth topic. So we've got to know, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
Sure. So I got to give a shout out to Google Docs or Google Sheets, I should say. If I'm doing some super basic stuff and I just need some quick answers on, so I'm a big fan of a spreadsheet, and I will die on that hill if I just need something that's super simple. And then again, so I'm going to talk from it quite a marketing perspective, because I use a lot of kind of marketing tools, especially around kind of marketing data. But you've got things like Clay. Clay is a really good tool for data enrichment. You can kind of pull in different data sources. I really like that as a tool. You've got tools like Lemlist, which is a really good kind of marketing automation tool, but again allows you to use AI to enrich data. More on the kind of reporting and data side is things like Looker Studio. It's free. I think most businesses, if not all businesses, should be doing some form of kind of reporting, and using that as a good place to start. Using things like some form of like heat tracking. So again, talking from a website perspective, I would go things like Microsoft Clarity. That's free to use. Again, check the laws and data laws in your jurisdiction, but there's other alternatives called Hotjar. You've got Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. They're really powerful tools to actually track what's going on. They're not always 100% accurate, so I wouldn't base your kind of too much reporting on those tools. But again, they're good starting places. And then you can combine that with like a good CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah. No. Yeah, that was some great shares and some things that we've heard before, and a couple of new ones too. So I appreciate it.
Well, in closing, Dominic, would you like to let listeners know how they could reach you after the show?
Sure. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Like that's where I hang out. That's where I communicate with people. I post very, very irregularly, so keep an eye out for that. We're doing some interesting stuff with our own attribution platform called Trace. Again, I post about that, so you can kind of check that out. That's it. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk data with anyone.
Awesome, Dominic. Well, thank you so much for joining the show today. This has been a great conversation. We learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too. thanks again. And I'll let Jesse close it out.
And that'll do with the video. So thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next week.
So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX.
Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jesse Lezak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time.